Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Weekly Win. My name is Tim. I'm joined by my friend Ken,
Hello, everyone. How are you?
and today we're going to be talking about a very hot topic. Again, secession. Ken, what are your thoughts on state secession?
Uh, I know that when we sat down to talk about this, we said that we would debate this a little bit, so there's going to be two sides. I would like to clarify very quickly that I'm kind of against secession, but I see why people are at least looking into it. I hope to take the side of the secessionists, and hopefully I can present at least some good arguments for them and not totally look like a fool. We'll see, though. We'll see. Tim, what do you think about secession?
Well, I happen to agree that secession, I think, is bad. And since you let me pick, I'm going to be covering why states should not secede. So I get the easy side.
Very well. All
All
right,
right.
everyone. If you're ready to sit down with us, let's begin. Should be short, sweet, and to the point.
Uh, Ken, would you like to open?
Sure. Let's let me start. That's always a great idea. Um, Let me start by saying that secession can be a good tool when it is used properly. And what I mean by properly is not 20 or so states in the United States decide to secede and form their own new American Confederation of States, we'll call it, right? When secession can be good is when you look within the states themselves and you see places like Oregon are getting ready to try to vote on a locality or on a local basis, excuse me, in the various localities that want this. And they're going to vote to secede certain parts of Oregon to, I think it's Idaho, and they want to rename themselves the Greater Idaho Region or something or another to that effect. Now, I live in New York, so a similar thing can apply. A lot of people outside of New York City, and I think I speak for a good bit of us in New York, we do not want to be subject to the same laws as Bill the Blowhard and the rest of those losers down there. But unfortunately, that's not how it works, and we are not going to, you know, uh, put forward any sort of motions like that because there's no willpower here, which is fine. I think I'd prefer it that way, but I digress. Tim, what do you think of that?
I think that's understandable. I mean, obviously my thoughts are more on state by state, not part of state versus part of state. Although that one does make a bit more sense. My opinion on secession is that generally speaking, it doesn't work. If you you take Texas for example, right? Everyone knows that Texas wants to leave. Texas wants to leave Texas sometimes. Kind of weird like that. Love you, Texas. But if they were to leave, the thing is, they have no unifying dollar. They use the United States dollar. They don't have any federal. On the federal level, we have a lot of things that the states don't have. Like we have a federal military, federal funding for schools, roads, etc. Um, Trade agreements with other countries, things like that are not what these individual states don't have it due to federal regulations and interstate commerce. Topic for a different time. But if a state were to leave, they would not have any of these. I'm going to contrast it now with Brexit, as that's still popular for some reason. And England has always used their own currency. When they joined the European Union, they never switched off of the pound sterling. So they have their own currency. They have their own trade agreements because the European Union does not regulate trade agreements with outside organizations. It kind of just regulates internally. So they don't have any of the limiting factors that a state leaving the United States would. So that's why Brexit makes a bit more sense than Texas or Oklahoma or South Carolina trying to leave the Union.
All right, that's pretty fair. Say, for instance, uh, like 10 or so of the southern states and, like 5 or 6 of the Pacific states or whatever, they all decide to secede, right? Wouldn't they be able to come up with their own currency if they didn't want to use the US dollar anymore?
Yes, the problem with that is if you let's contrast this a little bit to the Civil War, okay? Now, I'm no expert on the Civil War, but generally speaking, the Confederacy didn't really have a whole obviously they didn't have an interest in a currency, they just had an interest in fighting because that's all they wanted to do at the time. But in order to set up a currency and stuff, there has to be a lot of plans in place. And well, yes, in a more modern era, it'd probably be quicker. It's still the process of switching. Me as a resident of a southern state would have to go through a process of switching my United States dollar over to southern currency or whatever it is. You'd have to the value of said currency would have to be determined on the global scale. Trade agreements would have to be worked out for probably several months to up to a couple of years. There would be no real trade with the globe. That means the cost of everything is going to skyrocket. Inflation is going to go up. There's going to be a large amount of issues to start the country off.
Those are some pretty good points. Certainly didn't take a look at it from the economic aspect like that. I will tell you how I did look at it, though. I see secession as a possible way to people's interest in a new age. And the reason why I say secession is a good way of doing this is because there's no real political willpower to, you know, to redo the way that we do business now, right? The
Okay.
Congress is just dead set on the tax code that screws the poor and pays the rich. And of course, we're not going to get anything done about that because they are also the rich. There's no political willpower to do it. But there is some growing political willpower now, like I said, in the Pacific and in some of the southern states, actually. I might include a link to a Fox article where they discuss the various percentages. Excuse me. But there is a growing bit of political willpower now to try and secede and at least try something new. I think that could be a great opportunity to rewrite constitutions to be what people want in 2021. And I understand that's kind of weak given that the Constitution that was written in 1776 is still very good. It still works for us
Yeah.
today. But I do see it as a way to as for the people to sort of redress not only federal grievances but also some state grievances that they might have.
Oh, I don't disagree with you that I think there needs to be a fundamental overhaul, top down of the government. However, I don't think secession is the proper way to do it. Unfortunately, I don't really have an answer of what the proper way would be. I just don't see secession as the viable route.
That's fair enough. I think I think on a state level, I agree with you. Like the state of Texas shouldn't secede, excuse me, from the union. But if that lower portion of Oregon wants to join Idaho, yeah, I'm all for it. That's probably well within our influence to do, right? Or within our constitutions, rather.
Yeah, and
Probably. I don't know.
I mean,
They're voting on it, so it must be.
10th Amendment. It all falls down to the states and the people.
It's interesting you mentioned that because the urbanites and rural Americans have pretty much polar opposite goals in terms of politics and policy and such. So I don't know, man. People are starting to break away from the coastal elite that has now grown to represent urban politics, broadly speaking.
Yeah. I have
I
a
don't know.
feeling that the next couple years will give us a lot to work with in terms of teaching us if secession state, like on a county by county or state by state level, is the right option. But that's about all we have time for today. I thank you all for listening. Ken, as always, a fantastic conversation.
As always, it's a pleasure to speak with you. Guys, we will see you in the show actually later on in the week. Thanks for joining us. Bye bye.